Hi, everyone. This is Rivka Talalai, and I'm happy to talk to you all today about Rosetta Publishing. So we know that Rosetta is a data asset management system and preservation system, and in addition, we also allow you to take your metadata and externalize it through the publishing system. That's what we're going to talk about today. And then the benefits are basically allowing other external systems to access that metadata and do whatever they want to do with that, if it's indexing, later on for purposes of delivery, or whatever you want to publish your data for. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And so we're going to start off with a publishing overview, and I think the majority of this session is going to be just a basic overview of publishing. We're going to talk about the different options that we have for publishing, and we're going to show live demo of the configuration via UI, and just understand basically a little bit about behind the scenes how the mechanism works, and hopefully it'll give you behind the scenes look at what we do and a better understanding of how the publishing works in general. And we're going to move on to shorter areas. The collection publishing we'll talk about a little bit later on, and publishing customization, allowing you to customize publishing plugins with your own logic. And somewhere in the middle, we're going to start a live demo, end-to-end Rosetta Primo. And towards the end, we're going to show the outcome. Let's get started. So the publishing options we have, I think the mainstream platform used is the OAI-PMH, and that's what you're going to want to use if you're using Rosetta Primo suite integration. And so that's the mainstream, I think, that's used, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. We have NFS publishing, which is publishing to the file system, sort of a metadata export, if you will. We have Figshare that we're working on right now, which will publish via REST APIs. A little bit later on, we're going to be working on a Handle plugin that's scheduled for sometime in the near future. And of course, you can customize your own publishing with a publishing plugin with your own logic if you have a different platform you want to publish to. So we're going to start off with a little bit of the basics. When you want to start publishing, you got to ask yourself a couple of questions. Exactly what do I want to publish? How do I want my metadata to be converted? What format do I want it to be converted to? And where exactly am I publishing it? So this is all defined in the publishing configuration. We'll see that in a little bit in the Rosetta UI. And so you're going to start off with deciding on your Rosetta set. Of course, you're going to want to know exactly what population you're working on. So you're going to define a Rosetta set. Each one of these IEs is going to have to be exported. So you're going to need to choose your representation that you want to export. So for the purpose of this example, I'm going to export preservation master, and let's take modified master as well. And after I have an exported IE, I'm going to want to convert it to whatever format I want to publish. So the easiest way to do that is with an XSL converter, and we're going to show that as well. I'm going to use an XSL converter that will convert METs to DC because my IE is going to be exported in METs format, and I want to have an output of DC. OAI DC is one of the outputs that you may want. I'm also going to want to include all DC records, and I'm going to add collection ID as well into my example. After that, we have our published record, and then we just want to decide last where exactly we want to publish to. So that's the target, the publisher. In our example, we're going to start off with an NFS example because I think NFS is just a little bit more simple as a starting point. So let's show the configuration in the UI. So we're going to go into data management. We're going to go to publishing configuration. Before we start, I'm actually going to show you guys how to define your converter. So we discussed XSL converters, so let's just go into there before we get started. In the administrative side, we have general configuration files. We're going to go to XSL transformation, publishing subsystem, and we have a set of XSLs here. If we take really just one of the simpler ones as an example, we'll show it over here. Basically, this XSL is going to take the METs that I've exported and take all the DC records that it finds and just copy them in an output. And it's going to wrap this with an OAI-DC here tag, and that's going to give us the OAI we're going to need for our output. If I wanted, we said we're going to want to add a little bit more. We're going to add a collection ID as well. So a little bit more complicated, but really not that much. Is adding. I'm going to add a DC terms tag as well. I'm going to have the DC copy that we said we're going to do for all DC records. And in addition, I'm going to have a DC terms is part of tag that's going to access the DNX part of the METs and extract the collection ID from there. So basically, this allows customizing the converted format that you want. So ahead of time, you're going to want to decide on an XSL that you're going to want to use, and then you're just going to have to connect it back in the manage the system to the publishing configuration. Okay, so back here. So I'm going to add a new configuration. Let's call it NFS Publishing. And I'm just going to choose a set. You can create a set or choose a set that you've already created. And I'm going to choose Van Gogh paintings. I have a couple of those here. Let's see how many we have here in the results. Okay, so I have 20 records. I'm going to move on to the profile where I'm going to really configure what I'm going to do here with this set. So I'm going to call this NFS. And like we said, I'll take preservation master, modified master. I can choose any one of the representations I want to export. And here we have a choice between converter type and a target type, which is our publisher. So I'm going to go with NFS Publishing. There's also OAI. We'll talk about that later. And the converter type, so there are different kinds of plugins here. I'm going to go with the XSL IE converter because it will allow me to choose from the set of XSLs that we showed earlier. The other ones have different logic, adding CMS, a collection converter here. This is all obviously taken from Rosetta plugins, so you can configure your own logic into your own converter. But this is really an easy way to allow customizing to your needs. So we're going to choose the IE to Rosetta DC Primo that we showed earlier. Okay, so then here in the folder, I've already decided on a folder under my operational shared. I created a subfolder NFS Publishing. Here this is going to decide how to distribute the published records under how many different directories you want. So I'm just going to want 2 directories here. And then the file extension is basically, depending on your converter and what you're doing, what kind of an output of a file am I gonna get here? So, I mean, I'm getting an XML file, but I'm gonna, just for the purpose of this example, let's change it to TXT even. Okay, and then we're just gonna save that. Okay, so here I have my profile that I defined, one set. But as you can see, you can add multiple sets under configuration and multiple profiles. And then when you run the configuration, each one of the profiles is going to run on each one of the sets. Okay, so we're just going to save that. And running publishing. So we have 2 options for running publishing. I can run my NFS Publishing right here with the sync configuration, or I can run it as a scheduled job. So let's just talk 1 second about the differences between those 2. And if I go into administration side, schedule jobs, I have publishing. I have a publishing sync job here. So here, like any other scheduled job, you can schedule it nightly, weekly, monthly, however you want. And what's going to happen here when it runs under a schedule, it's going to go over all of the institutions that you have, and every single one of those configurations is going to run that we saw just now. So that's going to basically do everything. In addition to that, it's also going to run collection publishing that we'll talk about a little bit later. So we'll get back to that later on. But now for the sake of this test, I'm just going to run my configuration from here, and I'm going to just see what happens in the log in the meantime. Okay, so let's run that. And so here we have the conversion starting in the log. We see different new IEs have been created. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what happened in the file system. Okay, so like we said, we have two directories here. I chose two directories, and under the first one, it's going to randomly distribute them between the two. And here I have the different TXT files which are actually XMLs. Okay, so okay, and here we have the record, which is basically DC content. And we have here at the bottom, the DC is part of collection that we added as well. So it copied all of the DC that I had. And in addition, it added the DC terms from the DNX with my collection ID right here. Okay, so going to take one of these IEs now. And just going to play around a little bit here, and let's delete this IE, see what happens. Okay, so I've deleted my IE. I'm going to go back into publishing configuration, and I'm going to sync. And let's see if that IE is here. Hasn't been removed. Let's see, maybe I need to remove it from the recycle bin. And so we're just going to have to see why that didn't delete, but let's try something else. Let's try NFS deletion from here. I'm going to update my sets, and I'm just going to remove this here. Save that. Sync the configuration. second. Okay, so this is, I'm going to have to see what happened there, but basically there are several ways to remove IEs from publishing. One of them is deleting, and another way is to delete the entire set, or deleting the publishing profile, publishing configuration should also do the trick and delete them. So for NFS publishing, that's basically deleting them from the file system. OAI would be publishing them with a deleted status. Okay, so we see that the records have been removed from here. And so that basically brings us back to what's going on here behind the scenes. So we're going to go back to slideshow here. And I'm going to move on to the publishing logic. So basically we have three options. We have the create option, which we saw, update, and delete. So how does the mechanism work in the background? So as we said, we've created our Rosetta set, and we have publishing history in the background. So on the first publish, when I first create my configuration, my profile, in the database, we're going to have the publishing history saved in the background, which is basically each one of the IEs is going to be saved with a profile ID and with a timestamp of the last time it was published. So then I'm going to create a delta every time I run my publishing job. So between the Rosetta set and the publishing history, based on the delta I receive, I'm going to decide, Rosetta is going to decide whether to create, update, or delete a record. So if I have a record in Rosetta, in the Rosetta set that I've created, but it doesn't exist in the publishing history, we're going to create a new record. If it does exist in the publishing history, but it doesn't exist in the Rosetta set, we're going to delete it. And if it exists both in the publishing history and in the Rosetta set, but the timestamp has changed, we're going to update it. If the timestamp hasn't changed, nothing is going to happen. It's just going to remain the same. It's already been published. And when I say timestamp, I mean the modification date of the IE has changed. Okay, so we're going to move on to understanding a little bit about OAI-PMH. So I think NFS gave us a little bit of the basic understanding of how the publishing works, and now we can move on to OAI-PMH. So what's OAI-PMH? It's basically a protocol for metadata harvesting that works over HTTP, and the players are basically data provider and service providers. So the data provider would be the repository that's that's exposing its metadata. And so that would be Rosetta in this case. And the service provider is basically the harvester that's trying to harvest the metadata. So in the example we'll show, that would be Primo. And the way that this protocol works is basically with a set of verbs. Okay, so we're going to really just talk about, we're not going to go that much into depth here, but we're going to talk about the list records verb, which is, I think, the main verb that's used to harvest records. And so you're going to have your data provider service, and you're going to use the list records verb, and then you're going to need a set and a metadata variable. So the metadata prefix is a required argument. Basically defines the metadata that you're going to be externalizing. And then the set is optional, but it's also like another way to filter your data. So I mean, you don't have to use it. If you don't use it in the URL, you'll receive all of the different sets. And then there's another interesting argument that's really important, the from and until, that's used for harvesters. If I don't want to keep on harvesting the same data, I've already taken data from a certain date until a certain date, I'm going to want to take, the next time I run, I'm going to want to take just the data from a certain a date that's been published. So just to you know, prevent the harvester from working on duplicates or anything like that. Okay, so within Rosetta, we have the set and the metadata prefix as publishing parameters in the publishing configuration that we'll show in a minute. And you're going to need to set up the same set and metadata prefix on the Primo side for the harvesting. And the metadata prefix is really something that that you can customize. We'll show that in a minute also on the Rosetta side. So you're going to need to set up, if you want to use a new metadata prefix that isn't out of the box, you're going to use the code table for that, and you're going to need to set up the configuration on the configuration file as well. So we'll show that in a minute. And then you're going to need to access the actual service, which is OAI provider / request, and the list records, set, and metadata prefix as well. So we're going to go ahead and show how to configure the metadata prefix, as we said. So that's going to be under code tables. OAI metadata format code table. And I'm going to want to just choose a new format here. Call this even OAI DC for demo. We're going to create that and save. And then we're going to go to the configuration file, the OAI provider, and just configure a new metadata format here. OAI DC for demo, and save that. And then going back to the configuration, we're going to add a new configuration here. And so let's call this OAI, using the same, but the OAI publisher. And just to give you, we're not going to run through the whole thing here, but okay, so here we have, again, the XSL file that I'm going to want to choose. And here we have our new OAI DC for demo. So that's basically how you're going to set up a new metadata format if you want. And that's, you're going to choose one of these and whatever set you want. So for demo, and you're going to save that. And these two are going to be configured the same on the Primo side. Okay, so we're just going to leave that in the meantime, and we're going to move on. We're going to start our demo, just because, I mean, I wanted to show it at the end, but there's the Primo side that's going to take a little bit of time. So we're just going to kick it off here, and we'll go back to it later on and see what happens. But okay, so here I basically have a set of Monet paintings. I've published already 2 to Primo, right? So here we see this is Primo side. I've searched Monet and I found 2 paintings. Let's search that again. Okay, these are the 2 paintings that Primo has. But I have a couple more that I've ingested here. Okay, I have these 3 that I want to move over to the next stage. I'm going to move them to my permanent. And we're adding those 3 basically to my set. So if I look at the set I have here, in my results, I'm going to get all 5. So the first 2 have already been published, and I want to publish these additional 3 as well. So I've already set up a publishing configuration, configured it all the way to Primo. So it's this OAI, it's Primo publishing. Let's go in and see what we have here. So we have a couple of sets that we've connected to this publishing configuration, and in addition we have our profile. And if I view it, we'll see that we have here our set is Primo and our metadata format is OAI QDC. And so I'm just going to go ahead and publish that. I'm going to sync it from here. Okay, so that should start publishing. And then I'm going to go over to the Primo back office. And I'm not going to go into the details here because it's more Primo side, but I've created a pipe here that will connect to the OAI provider that we showed on the Rosetta side. Actually, I haven't actually showed it to you, so let's see here. Here we go. So this is what it looks like. And it's basically a service that, based on the metadata prefix that I gave it, and Primo goes into Rosetta and retrieves the data that answers these requirements. And so we're going to go back to Primo and just going to run the Primo pipe. Okay, so this is my Primo pipe. I'm going to execute that. I'll just show you while it's running what we have inside. What's the configuration here? So here I'm basically, I set it up to Rosetta Ex Libris, my demo server, and at the end here we have the OAI provider service, and we set up the metadata format, which is the metadata prefix, and the set that we want. I'm going to actually just save that and run it again. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so actually it's working on the harvesting right now. Let's refresh. Pending. And completed successfully. And we have 3 new records that it's seeing here. Okay, so we're just going to have to run indexing. So it's already been harvested by Rosetta, and I'm just going to run the indexing here, which is going to index it and allow it to be searchable. So let's execute that. And that's running in the background. Okay, so while that's happening, we're going to go back to our slideshow. Okay. So we spoke about OAI publishing, and we're going to move on to collection publishing now. Okay, so collection publishing is really pretty simple. It really allows us to publish collection metadata. If you want to just publish that collection metadata as is, that's fine. You can also mix the collection metadata and with the IE metadata, and then really utilize this new cool feature in Primo, collection, which is the collection viewer. We're going to take a look at that. I'm just going to go back to, and this is a new feature within Primo, collection delivery, which basically harvests from Rosetta and allows you to view the IEs within inside the collection. So over here we're going to have the collection thumbnail itself, and inside we have the different IEs. And if we go into one of them, we can actually view within Rosetta. That's kind of cool. So let's talk a little bit about about collection publishing. So the collection publishing is set with OAI. It's really pretty simple because you don't have to really configure that much. Hold on one second. I'm just going to go back to the slide here. And so it's OAI support. And the metadata prefix is always going to be OAI-DC. The collection publish flag, really that's all you have to do. You just have to turn that one on. And that's pretty much all you have to do. As we said, when you run the schedule job, at the end it's going to go over all of the collections that it finds with the publish flag and just publish them. And it's going to publish them based on a collection XSL. So you're going to want to configure whatever output you want in that collection XSL. We'll show that in a second. And as we said, the publishing is done as part of the publishing sync job. And the collection harvesting is really also pretty simple. The metadata prefix is set. It's OAI-DC, like we said. And the set itself is always going to be the institution code with the collections. That's pretty much it. And you can, as we said, publish collection data as part of publishing an IE, as we showed with the NFS publishing at the beginning, where you just extract the collection ID as part of the XSL conversion, and then you can really mix these two features to use that cool publishing viewer we saw. So let's just go ahead and see a little bit what that looks like on the configuration side. Okay, so we have here our collection management. Let's show what exactly this flag we're talking about is. So if I want to, I'm going to choose, let's say, Israel photos. And as you can see, the publishing here is set to no. So I'm not going to actually see this yet. I'm going to edit this collection and set it, I want it to be published. So it'll be published as part of the job. And then I'm going to go into publishing configuration, the collection publishing, XSL. And here basically we see we have, again, a copy of all the DC records of the collection metadata, and also an is part of as well. And that's if this collection is part of a sub-collection, so it'll give us the parent ID. And that's pretty cool. So let's see what that looks like here. Take one of these and just really show OAI. I'm going to show that. I'm going to use okay. So here is my collection set. And again, we see here the is part of. If I'm part of another collection, it'll show. If not, it'll just be empty. And DC type here is collection. So if I go back to, I'm going to leave this one open. I'm going to go back to the XSL before we go ahead and publish. I'm going to change this XSL to, let's just say, I want the DC type to be collection with capital C. I'm going to save that. And let's go to administrative side. And like we said, we need to run the whole job here to get the collection published. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run that. Okay, while that's running, let's go back here. And this was my collection ID. Let's see. Here it is. So it's been published. And in addition, the XSL as well has changed all of the already published records to capital C, because I have modified the XSL file. And it's really an interesting feature once you, I think it's from 5.3, that once you modify the XSL file, it'll republish everything, because basically means you want a different output. So that's republished all of my other collections as well with DC type. Okay, so that's a little bit about the collection publishing. Let's go back to okay, so we spoke about how we publish and the collection XSL and when it gets published. And let's talk a little bit about publishing customization. So the two options you really have for customizing your own logic are the converter and the publisher. So the converter, really, I think the easiest way to go is just work on your own XSL, and that'll simplify things for you. But if you, for some reason, don't want to go with that option, you can obviously create a new converter plugin. And the publishing is really something that you might want to go ahead and implement as your own with your own logic. And a really good place to start is the developers network, just to for any plugin for that matter. We're really not going to go into depth here about how you really create a plugin and how you deploy it into Rosetta, but we're just going to talk a little bit about the Java doc and exactly what you would need to implement if you wanted to create your own publisher. So, okay, so the converter is for publishing, and here as well the publisher plugin. So I'm going to open up the Java doc over here. And it's really, really simple. Basically, you're just going to want to, the init param method is for any plugin. It basically allows you to retrieve the parameters defined in the plugin UI. And then you're just going to use those parameters for your publishing logic later on. So, I mean, in the NFS example, it was the subdirectories and the folder path. But you can define really anything you want, and the user input that you receive, you'll use within your logic. So you're going to need to implement the publish and the unpublish methods. So the publish method is just receives the PID of the IE that you want to publish, and the converted IE that's already been passed through the converter. So you're going to get those two. And you're just gonna run your logic here, whether it be, if it's NFS, we copied the logic to the file system. We copied the files to the file system. If it's OAI, we'd place the records in a Rosetta database so that the service can externalize them. And the Figshare that we're working on right now would use a REST API here to externalize the data. So really, you could do anything you want here. And then the unpublish is what would be triggered if the Rosetta mechanism would realize that would send one of the IEs to be unpublished because it was deleted, or because the profile was deleted, set was deleted, all those different options that we discussed earlier. And then just here, you'd delete it from the file system, from the database. You would, for Figshare, we're going to use a delete REST API. So really, really simple. You just have to use your logic here, the logic that you want, and Rosetta will handle all of the deltas and decide when to publish and when to unpublish based on the publishing history that we discussed earlier. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the Java doc, and let's also let's take a look at a couple of the GitHub examples that we have. So there are a couple of examples on GitHub that you can look at. There's the NFS publisher and the Figshare that we're working on right now as well is already up there, so you could take a look at that as well. Okay, so we have, if we go in here, So let's just look at the example here of the NFS plugins. It's really simple. We have the PID and the converter that we receive in the publish method, and we're going to use the directory that the user configured, and we're just going to, there's some logic here for where to place it in which one of the subdirectories, and then we're going to add the extension that the user gave us and just write the file to the file system. Really simple. The unpublish is going to do the same exact thing, but just, you know, delete it from the file system. So it's really, really simple. We can take a sneak peek at the figure as well. So, I mean, here we're just going to receive the converted IE, which is basically contains an article, ID, and version, and we're just going to go ahead and create a fixture request with put, and later on for the unpublish, we're going to create a fixture request with delete. Also pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You could take a look at that and see what we did over there. That's just a little bit about publishing customization, and let's go back to our demo and see what happened with Rosetta and Primo. Okay, so I'm just gonna let's see if that's finished. Hopefully it's already finished indexing. Sorry, that's the collection. Let's search. And voila, we have our 3 new portraits of Monet. So we'll just go into one of those and see that it takes us to Rosetta. So that's just a little bit about collection and collection publishing, NFS publishing, OAI publishing in a nutshell. So just I hope you guys enjoyed that, and if there are any questions, feel free to ask Daniel. Any questions?
So thank you very much, Rivka.
Thank you.
That was very interesting and very clear. I will be sending out the recording once it will be available, so you can share this the session with any of your colleagues. So thanks again, and have a good day or good night to everyone wherever you are.